Thank you for watching. My name is Glen Morgan, and this is We the Governed. So today we're going to be talking about Washington State's recent actions here, where our Attorney General Nick Brown and our former Attorney General, current Governor Bob Ferguson, decided once again that it is a high priority to come in and protect criminals in Washington State. When I'm talking about that, what I'm referring to is this recent decision just a few days ago that the Attorney General decided to sue Adams County, the Sheriff's Office, claiming that it was illegal for them to collaborate with federal immigration officials in letting those officials know when the Sheriff's Office has uncovered violent sex predators or drug cartel members or other people like that Bob Ferguson and Nick Brown desperately want to keep here in the state, and they certainly don't want them deported. Now, where's Adams County? Adams County is a small county in eastern Washington. It's located right here. Of the 39 counties, it's not the smallest one, and it's not the closest one either, but it is one of the more small counties out there. And this apparently is going to be now the epicenter for the battle between Washington State and the sheriff's offices around the state, who are actually trying to get rid of criminals and get them deported out of the country when they find them. Now, before I get into the story any further, don't forget to like and subscribe. Just go down below. You can hit the like button if you like this video. You can subscribe if you don't already to this channel. And also, if I can just encourage you to share this video with other people who may not know about what's actually happening in Washington State, who want to know a little bit more about some of the drama that's actually going on here. So now back to Bob Ferguson and his plan for us. Unfortunately, this litigation against Adams County was actually quite predictable. We didn't necessarily know who, we didn't necessarily know which person he was going to step on or who he was going to try to make an example of, but we know that for quite some time, I mean, this image I created about Bob Ferguson and his plan for Washington State, I did this last year, this was very predictable. This is how he rolls. And after all, one of the things that has been just a desperate need, apparently, for the political leadership of our state for quite some time here, at least the last couple decades, is making sure they can do everything possible to keep illegal aliens and people who are criminals in particular inside the state. Whatever they do, you cannot send them away. And remember, it was A.G. Ferguson who was in office when Inslee, and he was just down the hallway from the Department of Licensing, when Inslee decided to fire that person for also cooperating with the Federal Immigration Services back in 2018. So he's well versed in this element of law. And between this and releasing violent sex predators off of McNeil Island, this is something that Ferguson has been very consistent about for quite some time. Now, I don't quite get why it is that the Democrat governors, because it's not just Ferguson, it's not just Nick Brown, but why these Democrat governors all around the country seem to be making their primary stand in the schoolhouse doors, making sure that whatever we do in this country, that we do not deport violent criminals. But there it is. This is their policy, and this Adams County lawsuit is just the most recent example of this policy in action. And after all, I mean, if Governor Ferguson protects violent sex predators, criminals, and then, of course, rapists, that's super important. Keep them here and make sure they can stay here, especially if they're illegals. That's actually, they're to get super protection if they are. What could go wrong? I mean, why could there be anything wrong with that? Now, the second question that tends to come up is, why is it they're suing Adams County? I mean, this is a county that, frankly, probably most people in Washington State, as much as I love my friends out there in Adams County, most people in Washington State may not be able to actually find it on the map. And why is this the one that Ferguson and Nick Brown have decided to go after? Because the sheriff in Adams County is not the only one who's come out and said, hey, I'm going to deport violent criminals, and I'm going to let ICE know, following federal law, I'm going to let them know when we have them in the jail or when we catch them attacking our citizens. Well, it's obvious. Adams County is very small. It's less than 20,000, well, a little over 20,000 people live there. They're relatively poor, so they don't have the resources to push back or fight against Nick Brown and the resources of the state of Washington. And they also voted for Trump, which is an extra political bonus for both Nick Brown and Ferguson. And this is why the Democrats are celebrating this lawsuit, because they figure they can bully a little county like this, and this will give them the momentum so they can use basically sacrifice the Adams County folk on the Hill and hopefully scare away the rest of those sheriffs all around the state and the citizens around the state who actually do want to get rid of the criminals that are here illegally. Now listen, we knew that these guys were going to basically strike eventually. We knew this. It's inevitable. It's in their nature. They've telegraphed this way ahead of time. They signaled they were going to do this. And this is their first strike that's really big and bold about ensuring that they retain as many criminals here who are here illegally, and more importantly, apparently, is encourage any of the violent criminals that are in other states where they are being deported more consistently to encourage them to, of course, come to Washington State. So this was inevitable. We knew this was going to happen, but it was interesting that Adams County was the first one to take the brunt of it. Bob Ferguson's shown us who he is and what he believes in for a long time. By itself, there's nothing new in just knowing that this is what he does, but it was important for us to see, and didn't expect it to be Adams County, but there you go. Now, of course, the director of ICE is probably going to be fairly focused on Washington State, or at least this is going to encourage him to do so. For a while, I kind of thought that Ferguson was kind of trying to be quiet in the background and let these other the other states out there kind of take point, like New York or Massachusetts or some of these others. Boston, certainly got a lot of attention, so is Illinois. However, I guess Bob decided, our governor decided that he wanted to jump in the fray, and so he's going to encourage Holman just to focus on Washington State. And I kind of anticipate that if Washington State keeps doing stuff like this, that I'm sure that we will be one of the next folk that they focus on. Obviously, if you're in Trump's shoes and you're back in D.C., he probably is starting to pay a little bit of attention to Washington State, because as I've mentioned in previous videos, the D.C. crew generally views Washington State as kind of a backwater of America, as much as it might be our center of the universe. And probably I would say right now, Trump is starting to pay a little bit more attention to Bob Ferguson here and decide what is he going to do about these guys out there. And most likely he's going to be handing it over to her, Pam Bondi, who is the new federal AG. And I would not be surprised if, in addition to the other problems that Washington State seems to be inviting the feds to come in and confront our state on, that this is going to help accelerate that process and whichever litigation or sequence of litigations tend to come. So, of course, why will the feds then withhold funds and sue Washington State? Well, they've given us lots of reasons to do so. I mean, we've given them, I should say, a lot of reasons to do so. So I think that we're just going to see all kinds of justification for what is inevitably coming our way. So the Washington Democrats, the resistance, as they like to call themselves, first of all, this protecting the criminals is going to be a highly motivating justification for the feds to come in and be more engaged and involved here than they probably would have been otherwise. And part of that could involve litigation. It certainly is going to involve withholding of funds. And when they see the state, they being the feds, when they see the state attacking sheriffs and local governments around the state who are going to cooperate with them, then I'm sure that that's going to provide a little bit more incentive. Plus, you have the additional compounding fact that Chris Reichdahl and the Attorney General of Washington State have declared total war on girls' sports. Bob Ferguson's jumped into that mix, and so have most of the elected Democrats in both houses. And so they've decided that girls' sports is something to destroy as quick as possible by letting as many boys who want to just go and compete and beat up on girls as possible. And so that's in process right now, which is further incentivizing, I think, the feds to engage in Washington State. You also have this desperate desire by Democrats in Washington State and their various NGOs, the school systems and others, that they want to promote DEI and, of course, deny and destroy merit whenever possible. That's also going to be throwing fuel on this fire. You also have the Democrat Party, through these different pieces of legislation and policy agenda that we have in our state right now, where they're inviting civil rights lawsuits that could be brought by the Department of Justice, either for censorship and potential political suppression with Bob Ferguson's domestic violent extremist task force, which is essentially an Orwellian structure that he set up and is his own little personal fiefdom and a continuation of his old push for HB 1333, which was a bill to silence and impose a censorship operation in Washington State. Ferguson is desperate to keep that alive, so that's inviting DOJ involvement in our state. You see this attack on girls' sports, which is inviting Title IX, civil rights lawsuits in our state. You see them attacking the Second Amendment, which is also inviting civil rights litigation in our state. And of course, now protecting criminals at all costs, especially if they're not here legally. And this just seems to be a lot of encouragement for incentivizing the feds to get more engaged and involved in Washington State, and certainly to cut off as much funding as they can to the state of Washington. So people will complain about that here, but obviously they're baiting and setting that up. And if you've been watching some of the crazy things that Democrat legislators are saying in Olympia, it just seems to get crazier by the day. And this is setting us up for a real interesting showdown, and it seems to be inevitable. Now, I know that if you've paid any attention to the state courts in Washington, you know that justice has died long ago. Most of the judges, unfortunately, in Washington State that exist in the Superior Court or even up to the state Supreme Court level, they clearly have no idea what the Constitution says anymore, nor do they care. And they're mostly political appointees who make decisions primarily on protecting the political aspirations of those who appointed them, since most of them, even though we technically have elected judges in the state, most of them are appointed by the governor. So it makes a lot of people demoralized when they see the incompetence or the failures of our justice system, the legal system that we have here. But of course, if the feds are getting involved, this is going to play out in federal court, which is going to be a very different animal, I think, down the road. It doesn't guarantee outcomes, but it certainly is going to be different than how it's been for a while. Now, again, I always describe people call it the deep state, but long before that term was being used, my definition for government bureaucracy and government in general is just that it's essentially, the best way to understand it is it's a mountain of corruption that is concealed by an ocean of incompetence. It's very hard to drain a swamp when it's an ocean, so when you're out there fighting against these kind of problems or challenges, it isn't as easy or simple as people would like it to be. It just takes a little bit more work. So Ferguson, of course, and his cronies and some of these other people in Olympia, in their fear-mongering and their egregious kind of response to everything, they're going to be trying to intimidate us. This is what they do. And so we shouldn't be surprised that they try to pick a small little county in Washington State to beat up that county and that sheriff first, and they'll probably be trying to demonstrate who they are to the rest of us by their actions. We know who these guys are. They've demonstrated this for a long time. Even if Ferguson pretends sometimes to believe that math is real, or he pretends that he wants to at least pretend like he cares about the police, at the end of the day, these guys keep showing their true colors, and we know who they really are. But at the end of the day, I don't think that this Adams County lawsuit is going to actually stop the inevitable flood of change that's coming to Washington State, whether the political establishment here wants it or not. This kind of exposure, when combined with the Act Blue challenges, the Department of Licensing risk factor I think that the state faces, no matter how many records they attempt to destroy, and the inevitable invitation to a variety of civil rights litigations that it seems likely that Washington State would lose. They're certainly on the wrong side of many of these issues. I'm not sure this Adams County lawsuit is going to be the magic the solution that I think Ferguson and Nick Brown appear to believe that it is. So if people are not intimidated and they continue to go down the road that I think many of them are going to go down, then Ferguson's going to have his hands full trying to plug every single leak all over the state. And I don't think he can hold back the flood as much as he wants to, which gets back to you and I. What is it that we need to do in order to do our part to keep pushing back against the corruption and the dishonesty and bad behavior in government? Well, if you believe like I believe, that if somebody is a violent sex predator in Washington State and they came here illegally from another country, that they should probably go back, maybe after serving prison time, then you can let your elected officials know and keep pushing back against guys like this who want to instead take those violent criminals and stick them in our neighborhoods. If you believe that girls should have the ability to play sports without getting beat up on by boys and having them take away their future in athletics, then you can push back at your local school board district. You can go in there and tell them what you believe, and I think more of us need to do that. If you're interested in working with me and helping expose other government corruption, and there's plenty of it, then you can take one of the Washington Doge classes that are going to be held all around Washington State, because these guys right here are giving us a lot to work with, and it's a lot of work that we have to do to expose what they're doing and what they have done and what they continue to do despite everything. And the only way you can get involved and make a difference and do more than just yell at your screen and or sit back and pop the popcorn and watch what happens. If you actually want to be involved and try to make a difference, you have to be willing to show up. I always say that because in the end, the future belongs to those who show up.